We were sitting around the dining table at our house, hosting a small dinner with two of my wife's coworkers and their partners. The evening had been pleasant, good food, light music in the background, and the kind of polite conversation people have when they're trying to impress each other. My wife, Sarah, had always been proud of her career. She worked as a senior manager at a large marketing firm and earned a very comfortable salary. I was proud of her too. At least, I used to think we were proud of each other. The conversation drifted toward work and finances. One of her coworkers joked about how expensive life had become. Another mentioned how hard it was to keep up with mortgage payments. Sarah laughed and lifted her glass. "Well," she said with a playful smile, "at least I know if anything ever happened, I'd be fine. Honestly, my husband would never survive without my income." The table erupted with small chuckles. Someone looked at me and said jokingly, "Man, she's keeping you alive over here." I forced a small laugh, the kind you give when you're not sure what else to do. But inside, something felt different. Sarah continued talking as if nothing unusual had happened. "Don't get me wrong," she added, waving her hand casually toward me. "He works, but my job is definitely what keeps everything running." Her coworkers nodded as if it were obvious. And that was the moment I realized something I had never truly noticed before. She believed it. She genuinely believed she was the one carrying our entire life. To be fair, from the outside, it probably looked that way. Sarah's salary paid most of the monthly expenses. She often handled the mortgage payments and many of the visible bills. Meanwhile, my job seemed much smaller. I worked as a consultant. That's what I always called it, at least. My work hours were flexible, my income wasn't something I talked about, and I never felt the need to explain every detail. For years, I had been comfortable letting people assume I earned far less than I actually did. Money had never been something I liked discussing. After dinner, our guests eventually left, thanking us for the meal in the evening. When the door closed behind them, the house fell quiet. Sarah started gathering plates from the table. "That was fun," she said casually. I helped her carry dishes to the kitchen, but my mind kept replaying what she had said earlier. "You really think I couldn't survive without your income?" I asked calmly. She shrugged without even looking at me. "Well, I mean, let's be realistic," she said. "You make decent money, but not enough to run everything alone." There was no cruelty in her voice. Just certainty. That's what made it strange. She truly had no idea. For the past 10 years, while everyone believed my career was small and quiet, I had been building something entirely different behind the scenes. Investments, partnerships, startup shares, rental properties. I never talked about them because I didn't think I needed to. Money wasn't supposed to be a competition between husband and wife. But standing there in the kitchen that night, listening to her wash dishes while casually explaining how I depended on her, I realized something important. The woman I loved had absolutely no idea who I really was. The next morning, the house felt strangely quiet. Sarah woke up early, as she always did on weekdays. I could hear the familiar sounds of her morning routine, the coffee machine humming, drawers opening and closing, the soft tapping of her phone as she checked emails before even leaving the bedroom. Normally we chatted during breakfast, but that morning something felt different. Maybe it was just me. I walked into the kitchen and saw her already dressed for work, scrolling through her phone while sipping coffee. "Morning," I said. "Morning," she replied without looking up. There was no tension in her voice, no sign that she even remembered the comment she had made the night before. To her, it had probably been nothing more than a casual joke. But for me, it had stuck in my mind all night. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat down at the table. "You have meetings all day?" I asked. "Yeah," she said quickly. "2 presentations and a client call. Busy day." She finally looked at me and smiled. "You're lucky you don't have to deal with corporate chaos like I do." I smiled back politely. That was another thing she believed, that my work was simple, quiet, and small. A few minutes later she grabbed her bag and keys. "I'll be late tonight," she said while walking toward the door. "We're celebrating a project launch after work." "All right," I replied. She paused for a second and added with a playful grin, "Don't worry. I'll keep the money coming in." Then she left. The door closed behind her, and the house fell completely silent. I sat there for a moment, staring at my coffee. The funny part was that Sarah wasn't a bad person. She wasn't cruel or arrogant in the way people might imagine. She simply believed the story that had formed over the years. She earned the visible paycheck. She paid many of the bills. So naturally, she assumed she was the financial backbone of our life. What she didn't know was that the life we were living had quietly been secured long ago. After finishing my coffee, I opened my laptop on the kitchen table. Within seconds, the familiar financial dashboard appeared on the screen. Numbers filled the page. Investment accounts, equity shares, rental income reports. Over the past decade, I had slowly built a network of investments that grew far beyond what I ever expected. It started with a small amount of savings and a few calculated risks. Then one opportunity led to another. I invested early in a tech startup started by a college friend. I bought 2 small rental properties when the market dipped years ago. I quietly partnered in a logistics company that expanded across 3 states. None of it happened overnight. It took patience, long nights of research, and years of discipline. I never talked about it because I didn't need validation. To me, money was simply a tool for freedom, not something to show off. But now I found myself staring at the total balance displayed on the screen. A number that would shock almost anyone who saw it. Sarah had always believed she was carrying our financial future. Yet the truth sitting in front of me told a completely different story. And for the first time in years, I wondered if it was finally time she saw it. That evening, I heard the front door open a little after 8. Sarah walked in looking tired but satisfied, the way people do after a long day of work and a successful project. She placed her bag on the counter and kicked off her shoes. "Long day," she sighed. "Sounds like it," I said from the living room. She glanced toward me and smiled. "The launch went great. The client loved everything. We even celebrated after work." "That's good," I replied. She walked into the kitchen to grab a glass of water, still talking about the presentation and how her boss had praised her leadership. I listened patiently. I had always admired her ambition, and part of me was genuinely happy for her. But tonight, something was different. When she finally sat down on the couch across from me, I closed the laptop I had been pretending to work on. "Hey," I said calmly. "Can we talk for a minute?" She raised an eyebrow. "That sounds serious." "It's not bad," I said. "I just want to show you something." She leaned back into the couch, crossing her arms with mild curiosity. "Okay, what is it?" I opened my laptop again and logged into the financial dashboard I had looked at earlier that morning. The screen loaded quickly, displaying the same list of accounts, investments, and properties. Without saying anything, I turned the laptop toward her. "At least look at this first," I said. She leaned forward slightly, expecting something simple, maybe a bill or a budget spreadsheet. At first, her eyes moved across the screen casually. Then she stopped. Her expression changed. She leaned closer. "Wait, what is this?" she asked quietly. "Just keep looking," I said. Her eyes scanned the numbers again. Savings accounts, investment portfolios, business equity statements, monthly rental income reports. I watched as confusion slowly turned into disbelief. "These numbers, are these real?" she asked. "Yes." She looked back at the screen again, almost as if she thought it might disappear. "And this total here," she said, pointing to the large figure displayed at the bottom. "That's your net worth." "Our net worth," I corrected gently. For a moment, she didn't say anything. The confidence she usually carried when talking about money had completely vanished. How long has this been like this?" she asked. "Years," I replied calmly. She shook her head slowly, still staring at the laptop. "I don't understand," she said. "You told me you were doing consulting work." "I am," I said. But consulting was never the whole picture. I began explaining everything. The early investment in my friend's startup that eventually exploded in value. The rental properties I bought quietly years ago when prices were low. The partnerships I had built with small companies that slowly grew into profitable businesses. Piece by piece, the story unfolded. By the time I finished explaining, the room had become completely silent. Sarah leaned back against the couch, staring at the ceiling for a moment before looking back at me. "You've been sitting on all of this, the entire time." I nodded. Her voice was softer now. Why didn't you ever tell me? I looked at her for a moment before answering. Because I never thought I needed to prove my worth with money. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she looked back at the screen one more time. And for the first time since I had known her, Sarah looked completely speechless. The room stayed quiet for a long time. Sarah was still staring at the laptop screen, as if the numbers might suddenly change if she blinked too hard. The confidence she usually carried when talking about finances had completely disappeared. Finally, she slowly closed the laptop and looked at me. I don't even know what to say, she admitted. Her voice sounded softer than usual. For years, Sarah had always been certain about one thing, that she was the one keeping our life financially stable. That belief had quietly shaped the way she saw our marriage. And now that belief had just collapsed in front of her. You've had all of this for years? She asked again, almost in disbelief. Yes, I said calmly. She leaned back on the couch and ran a hand through her hair. But why wouldn't you tell me? She asked. We're married. You didn't think I should know. I took a slow breath before answering. It's not that I was hiding it, I said. I just never felt the need to talk about it. She frowned slightly, clearly trying to understand. For me, money was never the point, I continued. I grew up in a house where people constantly compared salaries and success. Everything became a competition. I promised myself that when I built my own life, money wouldn't define my relationships. Sarah listened quietly. When we got married, I said, I admired how passionate you were about your career. You were proud of what you earned, and I respected that. I didn't want to take that away from you by turning money into some kind of scoreboard. Her expression slowly shifted from confusion to something else. Realization. She looked down at her hands. So, all those times I joked about being the one paying for everything, she said quietly. I gave a small shrug. I knew you weren't trying to hurt me, I said. But eventually it started sounding less like a joke and more like something you truly believed. She didn't deny it. For a moment she just sat there, thinking. I guess I did believe it, she admitted. The honesty in her voice surprised me. I thought I understood our situation, she continued. I thought I was the one carrying the financial pressure. I thought you were comfortable letting me handle it. In a way, I was, I said. She looked up at me again. But that doesn't mean I ever depended on it. Another long silence filled the room. Finally Sarah sighed and leaned back against the couch. You know what the strange part is? She said. What? She gave a small, almost embarrassed smile. I spent years thinking I was the responsible one in this marriage, and it turns out you've been 10 steps ahead the entire time. I chuckled quietly. It wasn't a race. She nodded slowly. I know that now. For the first time that evening, the tension in the room began to fade. Sarah looked at me with a different expression than before, less certainty but more respect. And in that moment, something important shifted between us. Because the truth wasn't really about the money. The real revelation that night was much simpler. For years she believed I needed her income to survive. But now she finally understood something she had never considered before. I never needed to prove my value at all.